Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. This is episode number 273 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and today we are challenging the way we think about bodies with Melissa Toler. I really enjoyed this chat. Melissa also used to work in the fitness industry, and I'd been enjoying her posts on Instagram about challenging the way we think about bodies for a while, and that was actually her big truth, how our culture values and devalues bodies. So I do want to give a little warning. If you have any history with body image issues or disordered eating, please know before listening that we explore a lot of topics in this interview that could be triggering. So proceed with caution. We discussed all the things we need to unlearn and relearn, how hard it is to part with our conditioning. We got into the body positivity movement, the moral imperative of health, the misconstrued relationship between body size and health, as well as diet culture. We also opened up about why we both stopped selling fitness and weight loss. So enjoy the episode, share it if it resonates. The show notes will be at untameyourself.com/TT-273. Again, that's untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -273. And before we dive in, I just want to let you all know, some of you who follow me online on social media and are on the email list, which if you're not on our email list and you would like to be, you can go to wildsoulmovement.com and enter your name and email anywhere on the site. But I've been getting into stand-up comedy over the course of the last 3 months. It's something I've always wanted to do since I was like 8 years old. My little brother's been doing it for years, and I just, for whatever reason, until this past spring, had never decided to just try it and see what might happen. So what happened is it's literally the most fun thing ever. It's also super vulnerable, uncomfortable, weird, and humbling, but I'm really getting into this. So I am doing open mics. I had, actually, at the time you're listening to this, my first real show was yesterday. Danielle Mercurio invited me to open up for her show called Does This Make Me Look Spiritual? Which those of you who listen to the show know that I've got plenty of material on that. So it was a total blast, and I'm posting my clips and my progress on the Patreon. I've made a new tier just for people who want to know what's going on with the comedy and see clips that I will not be posting online. When you are developing your material, it's really not wise to share your things far and wide. Apparently, people love jacking up other people's material in the stand-up comedy world. So people are always like, post a video, but I am only posting videos on Patreon. So go to patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed if you want to see the stand-up comedy videos. So that's that. Enjoy this episode. Make sure you leave a rating and a review if you listen to the podcast regularly and you love it. And now let's get into it. Everyone, I can just tell you right now, today's guest, Melissa Toler, we were just talking before we hit the record button. What we're going to talk about today, we're both very much in student mode on, but she has been sharing and unpacking, and like this has become part of her body of work. So I'm going to be probably more of the student here, but either way, what I'm saying is, and as you receive this caveat from me often these days, is, you know, don't take this as like the be all and the end all. Like, please do your own research. Please like take what we're going to talk about and like filter it through your own system, see what works for you, see what doesn't, but certainly use it for contemplation and curiosity and inquiry. So, Melissa,
yes,
our first question for everyone is, what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
So I would have to say the truth about how we value or devalue bodies in our culture is having a big impact on me. It is sort of, it has become the center of my unlearning and relearning. It affects how I live my own life, how I interact with people in life, but also my writing and just my work in general. Like, it's just, yeah, I know we'll talk a lot about that, but that's what is having a big impact on me now. That's what I'm reflecting on a lot these days.
Yeah. What was the impetus for you to even start looking at this and unlearning in this realm?
So, it was a long process, actually. It was, it's been probably in the making for the past 3 or 4 years. So I used to be a fitness competitor. So I did those fitness competitions for about 4 years, heavily into fitness. And along the way, I encountered different people who were talking about different things that sort of piqued my interest about weight loss and diet culture. And I started to really pay attention to those things. And so over time, my view has just really shifted. So like a lot of us, I spent a lot of time trying to lose weight and get in shape and look fit and all of those things and everything that comes with that. And then over time, my thoughts have evolved around that. And I sort of moved into the body positivity world. And around that time, like maybe a year or so after I sort of discovered that arena, I became connected with quite a few people on social media who were talking about social justice issues, right? Racism, sexism, transphobia, all like homophobia, all of those things, right? And so I started to put all of those things together, right? The body positivity part and then the social justice issues. And so I'm still seeing how all of those things connect. And for me, that's where the valuing or devaluing of bodies comes in, because you can see it in all of those things. They're all related.
Yeah. So I get so excited about topics like this, not because I'm pumped that people suffer, struggle, are devalued, but because it's all systemic.
Yes.
And if we can actually, the analogy I keep using lately and what I keep seeing in my brain is like a rubber band ball. If we can take apart the rubber band ball and see how it all got balled up to begin with, perhaps we can make some sustainable progress and change. It's my optimistic hope anyway.
Yes.
And
that would be awesome.
And it was, so I'm going to guess, but I won't assume. Are you familiar with Sonia Renee Taylor?
Oh, yes. I have a quote from her. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So she, when she came on the podcast last year, and first, it was almost a year ago now, and first used this term body terrorism that I'm quite sure she coined, is when I realized how like everything is an issue of the body. All of these systems of oppression point back to the body.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And she was an important voice on my journey. And her term, body terrorism, like woke me up. Like it was one of those moments where I was like, yes, that what she's saying is true. And that was a big turning point for me to like start to really explore all of the systems of oppression and how they're connected.
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious. Let's take the origin story route. So you kind of woke up, you got curious. What has the unpacking, unlearning, and then relearning? What's that journey looked like for you? If you feel like doing it chronologically or not, however it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it has been long. It has been confusing. It has been
so confusing.
So confusing.
Damn.
At times it has been enraging.
Yeah.
Like I can't even like explain it has been absolutely enraging. It has, invited different teachers into my life, which has been awesome. And I think now I'm on the part where there's a little less rage and a lot more pleasure and joy and softness and forgiveness in the whole journey. Yeah. So, it all started again when I started fitness competitions for a number of years, sort of evolved into the body positivity space. At the time, I was also a health and wellness coach, and I sold weight loss like many health and wellness coaches do, but I was selling a non-diet approach. And at the time, I wasn't realizing how I was using fatphobia to sell my products indirectly, right? The fear of being fat is what I used. And so
I'll raise my hand on previously guilty party on that as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what we learn, though.
Yeah.
That's what we learn in our culture. And that's definitely what we learn as people who are in the health and wellness arena.
Yeah.
That's one of the number one things that we learn. So, I started to unpack that whole thing, and I stopped selling weight loss and then came across a variety of different teachers whose messages really resonated with me or came in at the right time. Like Sonia Renee Taylor is one of those people. I think if I had heard her message 4 years ago, I would have been like, body terrorism, what is she talking about? Like, that's totally over the top, right? And so just people were coming in, or I was finding people or discovering people, hearing people's voices. It's seemingly at the right time for me.
Yeah.
And so at the beginning of some of those, new entry points into my journey, that's kind of where some of the confusion came in, right? It's sort of like, I believed this thing this way. I had this way of being for so long as a person, as a health and wellness coach. And now this person is saying something so different, and it sounds like radical. It's scary. What will my friends and colleagues think if I start to believe this thing? So there's a lot of, there's a lot of, it feels like there's a lot to lose. There's a big risk.
Yes.
Moving forward, which makes it even more scary and confusing. Because then you can, I probably tried to find ways to straddle the fence.
Yeah.
1 foot in, 1 foot out type thing.
And this is not you can't have any feet out on this one.
You got to be in.
It was a no feet out situation.
You got to be in.
What was, or what has been, the most hard to part with piece of conditioning for you?
So, yeah, you know what it is? It is the idea that we are required and expected to be healthy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, sometimes that still nags at me. You know, sometimes I'm like, yeah, there's no moral imperative for us to be healthy. But then I'm like, well, so that has been, I think that's been sort of, that has been the hardest thing.
That is like incredibly hard because literally from the moment you're born, you're getting taken to doctors and getting everything checked.
Yes.
We're told we need to do these checkups, and they're checking. You know, do you know who Anita Moorjani is?
No.
Anita Moorjani had a near-death experience. Her story was discovered by Wayne Dyer. She wrote a book called, oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of the book, Dying to Be Me, about that near-death experience. And then her book after that is What If This Is Heaven? And I interviewed her last year. And, you know, one of the things that she talked about is how in our culture, it's not healthcare, it's illness scare was the term she used. Because she's like, you're literally going to the doctor and they're testing for what could be wrong. Rather than putting any emphasis on what's going well here.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm pulling up something that I read this morning that I love. Do you know who Matt McGorry is, the actor?
Oh, yeah.
He's a big-time activist, and I love his stuff. And he posts a lot about body image things. And he shared something today from a woman named Michette Scott that said, I'm a thin person who rarely exercises and regularly abuses drugs and alcohol, whose diet consists almost exclusively of pizza rolls and cinnamon toast crunch. And I can't remember the last time someone told me that I was disgusting or that my body was unacceptable because they were, quote, concerned for my health. So I'm going to need some of you to come up with a better reason for your fat phobia and hatred of fat people, or better yet, maybe just learn to mind your own business.
Yep.
So what have you discovered at that intersection of like fat phobia and health, like what you were just saying?
Yeah. So, you know, related to that quote, I mean, we've all seen videos and pictures of thin women, particularly eating large amounts of food. And then when you read the comments, people are like, oh, you know, all these great things about how awesome she is. And just like that quote said, if the woman, especially if it's a woman, eating large quantities of food, like I remember I saw this video of a thin woman eating like a 40-ounce steak. I mean, it was like huge. And the comments were so celebratory. But if she were 50 pounds heavier, it would have been a totally different story. And so we have learned to equate body size with health. Mm-hmm. And we use health as, you know, not just a measure of like our well-being, because there's so many examples of how that's not even the case, but we use it as a measure of people's worth as human beings. Mm-hmm. We don't take into account a lot of external factors, social determinants of health, none of that stuff. So, you know, and the word health is it's so loaded and vague at the same time. Those are all the things that I think about with regard to health.
I'm not sure how deep into like spiritual practices, beliefs, or philosophy you are, but one of the things that I have really had to let go of is this idea that body weight is protection, and that's not to say it isn't true in some cases, but it's also really hard to confirm or deny. Mm-hmm. I think same with health. right? So it's kind of like spiritual health, if you will, instead of like physical health. And I had a partner who really was extremely fat phobic and prejudiced. Like, he would build himself up in that he had very low body fat, and that meaning that he had worked on and worked out a lot of his, emotional trauma and things like that. And it was fascinating because having lived with this person, I was constant witness to like the unhealthy aspects of his experience and behavior, right? So there's really, it's so tricky. There's so many things. But, and I had internalized that and shamed myself because all of this was happening during a point in my life where I had put on some weight. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, what's wrong with me? Spiritually, emotionally, because health-wise, my energy was fine. Like, I didn't have, like, I'm not super into going to doctors. I don't do. Because part of me goes, if I go, they're going to find something wrong. And if I don't know, then I'm not going to be, like, worried about it. Like, that's an interesting inner conflict as well. So I'm rambling a little bit, but what comes up out of anything I just shared there for you?
Yes. So the comment you made about your partner's like physical health, but then the background unhealthiness that
behavior
has facilitated, this external view of health. And so, if I can articulate this well, I think a lot of us have experienced that, right? It's the anxiety, worry, stress around maintaining or attaining, but especially maintaining this outer shell of health.
Yeah.
While ignoring like the stress that's required to maintain that and not seeing that as potentially unhealthy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have if you've ever been on a diet or a fitness kick or trying to lose weight, you know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was telling you before we started recording that I batch my interviews. So the conversation I was just having before this one of the things we were talking about was like discipline as a devotional practice. Like I also understand that when I eat a certain way, I'm able to function more optimally. And so then, but that is connected to like a higher purpose and a higher reason. I'm going to do that so I have the energy to show up and do my work, or so I could travel and not feel jet lagged, or so I can like stay up later and maybe still get up early if I'm like getting into stand-up comedy now and I'm like going to open mics in the evening that run kind of late. Like there's a functional aspect to it, but I have personally found it challenging to go all in on like, yes, this is a functional thing without all the like mental and emotional weirdness that was tied to it because of my previous relationship to fitness and health.
Absolutely. I think trying to discern what you're talking about, like I'm eating this because of energy, because I want to feel good, because I have to do this thing. I don't want a full stomach. I don't want to be sleepy, whatever. Trying to separate that out from what we've learned through diet culture is really challenging. And oftentimes, when we're trying to, I guess I'll speak for myself. When I was trying to initially, like when I was on this path initially, I tended to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Which is understandable, but is not always the best way to go, because if I go from being restrictive and saying, oh, I can't eat X, Y, and Z, and then I go to, I'm going to have anything whenever I want, I think that's fine too, but then it sort of plays with the thing that you're talking about. Because there are foods that, for me, give me more energy. There are foods that make me sleepy. And if I'm not able to, like, discern that and be okay with that, that's the thing. Like, the being okay with it can be really challenging. And when you're trying to do that on the background of diet culture, it can be really challenging, right? Because you still have those thoughts in your head about what's good food and what isn't good food.
Let's talk about that languaging, good and bad. It's pervasive in this conditioning and programming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so good food, clean food, healthy food, all of those things are ways that we value what we put in our bodies, but also another way of valuing, it's sort of an indirect way of valuing bodies. And a lot of times those things are tied to our morality and value as a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was good today because I had kale. Right. I was so bad today. I had cookies for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be, and I see it in people who are around me. It can be very difficult to break free from that language and behavior, just that way of thinking.
And I think, in my perspective and experience working with people around like healing and transformation, like the first step is awareness. So even for people listening, even noticing like, oh damn, like labeling, putting a moral label on a food choice or an exercise choice, that those two things don't actually go together.
Exactly.
Like we to get to a place of more neutral around, I either did this thing or I didn't do it.
Yep.
I am not a good or a bad person. There shouldn't be shame or blame or guilt attached.
And that's a huge thing to unlearn, because once you are really starting to pay attention, you will see this language and behavior in almost everything, right? You see it on social media, you see it on TV shows, you hear it on radio. It is everywhere. Like once I started to really become aware and pay attention, it was just fascinating how pervasive this language is and this way of being is in our culture. It's almost as if it's just part of just the way we speak. It's part of how we relate to each other, especially as women. It's really, and because of that, it can be extremely difficult to break away from it.
So I'm going to guess that your work primarily is around like women, because that's what you are, probably what you can relate to more, especially since you had the fitness competitor. But I'm curious, in your research and your learning, men are not exempt from this.
Oh, not at all. All you got to do is look at Men's Health magazine. It's not very different from Women's Health or those other fitness magazines for women. It's along the same thing. It is a way of reinforcing a certain way of looking. It's a way of reinforcing what we value in bodies in this culture.
Yeah. I think it's an Audre Lorde term, that mythical norm, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Which, as a person who has never been exactly in the mythical norm, I could like poke it at certain points in my life, but never in it. That is so demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that I chose the word demoralizing there, because it comes back to what we were just talking about around attaching. It's actually not demoralizing. It's dehumanizing. It's devaluing.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. This is what I love about the way we do the show. There's one question in the beginning, and then it just goes where it goes.
Yeah.
And the things like pop up like kernels, and it's like, okay, we're going to do that now. The dehumanization aspect of all of this.
Oh, my God. Yes. Yes. So much to say about that. But I'll just start with, I think last year. So let me do a little sidestep.
Yeah.
So
and you don't have to limit yourself at all. Take all the time you want.
I know, but I have to, because I'll sidestep totally off. I need to come back.
I get it.
Dehumanizing. Okay. So I do and have done a lot of my unlearning through writing. I've been doing that since 2014, when I started to just write about relationships and men and sex and just all of those things, like trying to unpack stuff. So I started writing a blog back in 2011, 2012. Anyway, when you look at my blog, you'll see how it's evolved over time with the way that I have evolved over time. And so last year, when I really started to grasp the effect of dieting and diet culture, I had this realization that it is dehumanizing. And I wrote this blog post about exactly that. And the way that I felt like there are numerous ways that it dehumanizes us. And one of those ways is it sort of demands perfection. Like there's this specific way for bodies to look. And humans just aren't perfect. We're just not. And it ignores the messiness of being human. It doesn't leave room for all of us, all of our humanness. I think it's also dehumanizing because it completely ignores body diversity. Our bodies are not going to be the same. I'm not going to get the body of someone who's on the cover of this fitness magazine, even though the headline is telling me I can have this body. Like, it just isn't.
It's so deceptive.
Deceptive. Yes. Very deceptive. And of course we want that, right? Because we see how valued and how valuable it is. So of course we're like, okay, I'll buy this. I'll do this. I'll spend my time trying to get this. And it just is a big disappointment.
I'm going to pause you there because I want to reiterate this thing that you just said. We grow up, we are inundated with messaging of what is valued and what is not. And that is how the conditioning takes hold.
Yes. Yes.
We see that it is literally exalted. Which then on the other side of a thing, we see how little, like our subconscious is so genius, right? So it's making all these observations even if we're not making them consciously. If we're seeing how highly valued something is, what is on the other side of that coin is how not valued the other side of it is. And for those of us who are occupying the, quote, other side in any way, that shit is so detrimental.
It's super detrimental because it asks you to go against yourself, right? And
yes.
And you do in a variety of different ways, right? It asks you to go against yourself in pursuit of this mythical norm or getting closer to the top of the hierarchy because there are prizes up there. And, we see that there are prizes, but you sacrifice yourself in the process.
What are the prizes? I think we know them, but let's articulate some of them.
Well, like the world is basically set up for you. And so an example of that, right, is thinness. The world is set up for you to be comfortable at every twist and turn. You go into any store and you can find your size. It doesn't matter if you go to Target or Ann Taylor, like Macy's, you can probably find your size. You can get into, spaces are created to keep fat people from not being able to be part of that. So that's a really good and obvious example of the prizes. Like, you're made comfortable in the world.
Yeah. I think about this a lot when I travel because even though I have put on weight over the years, I'm a petite person. I'm 5'3". I don't have long legs. I don't take up that much space. So like on airplanes, like I can get comfortable. If there's an open seat next to me, field day,
yes,
right? But
same.
even if there wasn't, I'm quite comfortable in a single seat. I think it's like an atrocity that someone would have to pay extra for more space because of their size.
Yes.
And that there's like even at amusement parks, there are seats for bigger bodies because it's a safety issue.
Yes.
Right? There's a liability there for the owner of the amusement park, so they've accounted for it in a way. Mm-hmm. But like on an airplane where it's more like the drivers are more capitalistic, there's not a liability.
Yes.
They don't have to, and so they don't.
They don't, no. And honestly, those seats are getting smaller than they were. I mean, they just are. They are getting smaller. And I'm short also. I'm 5'3". And sometimes on some planes, I feel like my knees are touching the seat in front of me, which has not happened in previous years. But
which then makes me wonder. It's like, I am a small person. Even like someone taller. Like, there are many ways for a body to be larger than my body, right?
Yes.
Whether it's weight, it's height, it's whatever, width. So uncomfortable.
Yes.
And then my brain goes, but how would we measure and like average this out? But it's like, you know what? There are mathematicians, there are physicists, there's like, this is why there's architects, there's people to figure this shit out if they wanted to.
Anything is, of course, anything is possible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so the prizes are that the world is set up for you to be comfortable and you don't really have to do much. So people want that, right? People want to not be ridiculed. People want to not be humiliated. People want to go to their doctor's office and not have a diet pushed in their face when they're coming in for like an ingrown hair, right? Like people want that, which is just basic humanity, really.
Yeah. So you've used the term diet culture a bunch of times, and I'd love for you to just explain for anyone listening. Again, we can all presume, but are there pillars of diet culture? How would you describe it?
So, I think the first time I heard that term was from Virgie Tovar, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And my understanding of diet culture is it's essentially, if you look around the culture we live in a diet culture where it's a culture where a huge emphasis is placed on thinness and health and using food and or exercise in order to achieve this ideal state of body weight and health. And it's like we were speaking about earlier, it's like in the culture. It's in the air we breathe. It's on TV. It's on social media. It's on radio. It's in magazines. It's in books. It's in children's books. Like it's part of the fabric of our culture and how we interact with each other and how we just get along.
So how are you working with people around this these days?
Through writing. So like I said, I do a lot of my unpacking, unlearning through writing. It has completely shifted just the way I think about stuff because it allows me to like really challenge my beliefs about something. Mm-hmm. And when I'm writing, things just come out and I'm like, whoa, I did not realize I thought that. So I used to be a health and wellness coach. I think I mentioned that. And so in the past year or so, I've started to work with people through writing, using writing to unlearn different things. But primarily I work on things around the body. So that's been a lot of fun. It's been a huge, huge, huge thing.
What do you find problematic about the body positivity industry?
Whew.
Just a light question lobbed out there.
No. You know what? Here's the thing. It is, in many instances, the same or very similar to diet culture. It oftentimes reinforces the hierarchy where only certain bodies are deemed valuable. And those are thin, young, white, yoga positioned, green juice drinking bodies in the name of being body positive. And, there are still limits placed on who can be accepted and acceptable in the body that they have, right? There's still limits on what's acceptable, on what's worthy and what's valuable.
Did you see, I forget the woman's name, but there was a woman on the cover of Self magazine, I think it was last month, who is like a very large woman. And I think she's comfortable identifying as fat.
Yes.
Did you read through any of the comments?
No, I didn't.
It was a good choice on your part not to.
No, I know.
So a lot of what we already talked about, there's people like, yeah, good for you. So there's a really interesting aspect of positivity that is still like patronizing and not helpful. Like, this is so inspiring, or this is, because it's like, it should just be normal, because we're still not normalizing a thing, right?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yes. I'm just making a note so I don't forget this one thing.
Yeah. Well, and then while you're making your note, and then there were just the hordes of people who wanted to, again, exalt health and say there's no way this woman could be healthy at this weight.
Yes.
She's obese. This is like...
As if they really care. They don't. Like, you don't... These are... I mean, based on the way that these comments are written, these are people... These are not people who care about strangers on the internet. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's these veiled... Like, it's so enraging because it's like this fake caring about strangers. I care about her health. She's not healthy. She's going to die. She probably has diabetes. Like, none of that, number one, is your damn business. And number two, you don't care. So just keep it moving. Like, call it what it is.
Right.
You don't like her fat body. Like, just say that to yourself and keep going.
Yeah. What was your note that you're making?
So we were talking about body positivity. And so, you know, I have been critical of it for a long time. But I then realized recently that body positivity can be a good gateway into, like, really learning about body acceptance, fat acceptance, and all of the issues that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. Because it can be jarring to go from, you know, being steeped in diet culture to learning about body terrorism, right? It's a nice
it's a bridge.
Point. It is a bridge, yes.
You know, I appreciate this, and I've also thought this about people who I see as, I call it junk food spirituality, where it's like the kind of empty, platitude-y, light-washed, often also whitewashed stuff. And we can justify it, similarly to like what you just said, being like, well, it busts in. It wakes people up. It gets people from being like ignorant and asleep and disconnected and unaware. It at least wakes them up and then brings them in and they can find more. And I'm like, and I don't have an answer for this, but this is an inquiry I'm in probably now for 2 years. Is that actually helpful? Is that bridge actually in service or not? I know my opinion. Question. I'm curious on yours, and I'll tell you mine.
You know, so I don't know. I think for me and my personal experience, it has been helpful. Mm-hmm. The problem is people get stuck in the bridge and think that the bridge is the place to hang out at.
Yeah.
And not. So the bridge is time for deep inquiry and introspection about what it is that, you know, you're really unlearning and unpacking, right? Like, what was it about your previous way of being that was harmful to yourself and maybe to other people, right? To me, the problem is getting stuck in that bridge. Little, that's the problem. And thinking that is the arrival point. When I personally believe there is no arrival in this whole thing for any of us, right? Whereas, as we talked about before we started recording, we're constantly unlearning and relearning.
Yeah, and I find as I've been having more conversations specifically around social justice and unpacking everything of and or related to it, unlearning, bringing awareness, seeing things that we didn't see before. One of the things that I find makes it so sticky is that there are not a lot of like proven solutions. It's you know, like there's a lot of wisdom. There's of course a lot of progress that has happened, but these systems are so big and so intertwined. It's a real beast, which I think for me sometimes feels so enormous and so discouraging, but not enough to go, screw it, I'm out.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but because we have to keep going. So this goes to what you were saying. People think the bridge is the arrival point. And it's not, which again makes me wonder, so is that useful? Like, do we need to be shocked? Do we need like the Sonia Renee Taylors of the world being like, no, don't give me some of this bopo BS. This is straight up body terrorism. But at the same time, I also come back to like my spiritual beliefs, which is like everyone is having their own experience and kind of needs to. I literally I need to just focus on the things I can control and not worry about the things that I can't. I'm not in charge of other people's experiences. So who am I to say that any path is better than any other? But But I still do. Like when you can see, when your eyes become attuned to things that are problematic, it's like, it's all you can see. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate? It's like having these new glasses being like, oh my God, everything is a problem.
Everything is a problem.
Son of a bitch. None of this is okay.
Yeah, I'm wearing the everything is a problem glasses too. Yeah.
Damn. But you had mentioned earlier that you've come to a place where like you're able to access more joy now, more ease, or more however you put it. So you somehow made the transition. Somehow you're wearing those glasses, but still able to like be helpful, useful, enjoy your life, and breathe.
Yes, and I'm trying, right? I am really trying, because when you walk around with the everything is a problem glasses, then that can be helpful, but then at least for me, sometimes I can get so focused on it that I don't make room for softness and pleasure, because I'm always raging and fighting against something. Mm-hmm. And so I personally find that has been a struggle for me to stay in that place of softness and pleasure and joy. And oftentimes I'm reminded when I read something or I hear someone else say something. One of the books, and you may have heard of this book because a lot of people are talking about it, is Emergent Strategy.
Yeah, a million people have recommended it to me. I haven't gotten it to it yet.
So it's a great book. I haven't read it in its entirety. I'm bouncing around it, but it's one, that I read and put down and come back to. And it's one that reminds me of the softness and the joy of this work, really, because you can't always, you can, but you can't always be raging and mad and fighting, right?
Yeah. So how has your own relationship, what's your current relationship to food and fitness like now that you've done so much of this unpacking?
So with food, I don't think of food as good or bad. I essentially eat whatever I want, what makes me feel good. Sometimes I eat things that don't make me feel good. And that's just part of the journey. Fitness, it's interesting because I'm a lifelong lover of exercise, right? Mm-hmm. I've loved exercise and moving my body since I was a little girl. There were aspects of my fitness competition career or life that I really loved. I did like learning new ways of working out. But at the same time, those ways of working out were always tied to my body's appearance. Yeah. And so it wasn't until recently, I think maybe this year or late last year, where I realized I still had that connection. Right. It was still in my muscle memory of, I've only been to the gym one day this week. I got to go, that voice mm-hmm. Of years past is still there. And so what I have been working on is reclaiming what fitness means to me. Yeah. Right. It's not necessarily being able to run 6 miles or lift all this weight. It is the way my body feels, and are my joints aching? Can I stretch? So I'm still in that phase of reclaiming fitness. Like, what does it mean to me?
Yeah. So if diet culture is the problem, what is the culture we want to create? So I'm looking at, a lot of the things in social justice. Every once in a while, someone will pop up and be like, hey, y'all, let's remember to also be talking about what we want to create, not just what we want to dismantle. Yes. So, And this is obviously an opinion question. This isn't like Melissa's going to drop the factual truth, one answer about this right now.
No, because wouldn't it be awesome if I had it, but I don't.
Right. Let me know if you find it.
No. So, one of the things I wrote about, I think at the beginning of this year, was I wrote a blog post. I think it was, can we create a world where all bodies are worthy? Mm. And so this was where the Sonia Renee Taylor quote comes in, because she wrote something on Facebook that made me write that post. Right. And she said, to bring forth the world we say we want, we must be willing to constantly look at how we are replicating these systems of body terrorism in all we do. Not if we are, but how.
Yeah.
Because ways are. And so I want to say that because I want to just acknowledge that, yes, I want to focus on creating what it is that we want. But reading that quote from her made me realize we have no idea of what that would look like. We have no idea. And so like that in and of itself is like feels so daunting, but also can feel full of possibility because we technically can create whatever we want. So, I want to create a world where all bodies are worthy. I know that sounds lofty and vague, but like that's what I think of. Like when no matter what size you are, the color of your skin, your gender, your physical or mental ability, we are all valued the same. And just where I am right now in my journey, I feel like that's sort of the central, like that's the nucleus. Mm-hmm. And so when we have that, there's no need for all of this other stuff. There's no need for diet culture. There's no need for racism. There's no need for any of that stuff. How we get there, I have no idea. But
calling it the nucleus really gave me a visual that makes so much sense because even as you've been talking, there's a part of me that's been going, yeah, well, also like capitalism, right? This is very huge market industry.
Totally.
So much profit to be had off of people's insecurities. And so to me, one of the things that feels most daunting about it is that we would have to somehow impact the overall culture enough that enough humans would care more about people's humanity than money.
Yeah, that's daunting.
Real daunting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, again, not a reason to shut down, a reason to go, cool, well, like, let's touch as many people as we can while we're here. Like, that's the only way I can keep going and not shut down is being like, well, I'm one person. Let's see how much of an end I could put in.
Yes. I think it's important for us to do our part. Like, what part are we contributing to it? Because we're not going to save the whole thing. No. We're not even going to see the transformation of the whole thing, right? Maybe not even a minuscule amount of transformation. It's that's a definite possibility, right? That we may not see that.
Yeah.
So what part can you play in this?
Yeah.
What's your part?
What is your part? And I love that question because, again, like everyone listening, often the people I'm interviewing are some kind of like entrepreneur or thought leader, or they have a platform. And a lot of the people listening do have that, but a lot of them also don't. And that doesn't exempt someone from any responsibility because you might have a family. You might be raising children that might be around to see more progress than we get to, right? You are part of a community. You're part of a work. Like you go to a gym. You hear how people talk to and about each other and about themselves. So how do you personally feel about and how do you approach policing this? I don't love the word policing, but that's kind of what it is in your own life and in your own world.
Policing what specifically?
How people talk to and about these things and about themselves. Because I think this is one of the ways that we can affect, right? We could be like, that's not.
Yeah, so I agree with your point about we don't need to have a business or platform to create change, right? Because we are humans sharing this world with other humans and we're always having an impact and influence. So so I do struggle with that, with policing the way people talk about and to themselves and other people. I think it's important that our language, the words we use are really important. The way we talk about people, the way we speak to other people, and obviously the way that we talk to ourselves, because it's all a result of living in this culture where if we don't have a body that's valued, then we recognize that. And so we speak to that. I have sort of backed off, if that's the right word, on the way I approach things. Like I have been an all or nothing person, right? But I also recognize the process and the journey that's involved in all of this unlearning and unpacking and relearning. And I've been in situations with friends, coworkers, family members where people are speaking negatively about other people's bodies. And honestly, it depends on my relationship with the person and also the day that I'm having. Because sometimes I'll just say, like, that is not cool. Don't say that. Or just mind your business. Nobody's talking to you. But other times I find that it has been valuable to sort of get on my soapbox a little bit and explain why what you're saying is not helpful. It's actually very harmful, not only to you, not only to the person you're talking about or to, but also to yourself, right? Because what you're saying when you speak badly about someone else's body, like you're ultimately acknowledging that you fear being like that person, right? And so you have to then police yourself to avoid getting to that place, right? And I think once you realize the impact that it has on you, I think it might be a little bit easier to be like, okay, to like reconsider the way we speak to each other.
You know what I appreciate about this point is it's bringing us back to like, what is our stake in the thing? Because we can only ever be, really the only thing we can ever actually affect is what's going on inside our own selves, right? I was listening to, this is unrelated, but it is related. My friend Susanna Frioni has a podcast called Love, Sex, Desire. And she recently interviewed, at the time of recording this guy, Ken Page, who wrote this book called Deeper Dating that I'm obsessed with. It's like the best book I've ever seen on dating. And one of the things, there's something in his book that he talks about the wave, how like when you meet someone and they're available, often we'll have this inner resistance that he has described as this wave where we'll try to find all these reasons why this isn't good. Those of us who are like dealing with our stuff. And so Susanna asked him, what do you do when you notice that someone you're seeing is experiencing the wave? And he was just like, you know what? It's actually, I'm not even going to answer that because it doesn't matter. The only thing you can actually do anything about is how you're experiencing it when it happens to you. And I loved that. And to put that in the context of what we're talking about here, when you were saying pointing it towards the impact that that's having on you rather than the other people, I'm like having a moment of clarity here because I feel like often there's a lot of conversations. We have this conversation a lot on the podcast of intent versus impact.
Oh, yeah.
And we're wanting to hold people accountable for the impact we're having on others. But I think probably a smarter, perhaps more effective, like highly percentage effective way is to point people towards the actual impact it's having on themselves.
Yeah.
It's almost like leveraging people's selfishness and self-centeredness.
Yes. Because honestly, I think a lot of people care about things when and if it affects them. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so we see that all the time. And yes, there are people who do care about their fellow humans and want and want to be part of the greater good. But a lot of people really care about how things affect them. I mean, I think we see that a lot these days.
That's cool. That's just something to like really stew on. So what else? Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wished I would have?
No, we've talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And again, this is one of those conversations that's like, we can't tie a bow on it at the end. It's not like, great, thanks so much for that. We got some answers. We got some, like, it's like, we're just exploring because this is complex and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I appreciate you being in the inquiry with me, sharing around that, sharing your perspectives. If anyone listening is like, where do I start? I want to go deeper on this. Do you have any like favorite blog posts that you've written or the ones that have like, have just based on the response, like hit people the hardest or like had that impact of like really waking people up and shaking them up?
Yes. So there are three that come to mind. One is why I stopped selling weight loss. I wrote that a couple years ago. Another is, what is it? It was about, Fatphobia in woke spaces.
Yo, I'm going to hang up and read that immediately.
So, and then, can we create a world where all bodies are worthy?
Cool. We will find those 3 and we'll put them in the show notes. This is episode number 273. So show notes will be at untameyourself.com/TT-273 for anyone listening. And I already said that in the pre-recorded intro anyway. So we're just like reiterating it for people to go check those things out. And we talked about Sonya Renee Taylor. She has a book called The Body Is Not an Apology. Any books that have really helped you or had a deep impact on you as you've been doing this work?
So I love The Body Is Not an Apology. I love, like I said, Emergent Strategy. Body of Truth is also a good one, Harriet Brown. I read a lot of blog posts also. Yeah.
Any other bloggers you recommend?
So I love Hillary and Dana from Be Nourished. My friends out in Portland, Oregon. So many. Why am I blanking? Sonya Renee Taylor. Ivy Felicia is another one.
Cool. This is great. And again, it's a start. I feel like a lot of people, and this is really one of the, especially the fatphobia, realizing where this lives in us. It's intense.
Because it's there. It is there.
Well, it's like racism. It's not, and it's like what you said about Sonya Renee Taylor's quote earlier. It's not a matter of if, it's where.
Yes.
It's where and when. It just is, because it's so deeply ingrained in our, so for people listening, like, we're not even making you wrong about it, because we all have it.
Yes. And for those people who are tempted to say, no, I don't, it's either you have not been paying attention in this culture or you just, I don't know. But what I realize is that we have to make an active effort to get rid of it, right?
100%.
It's so passively absorbed. It's almost like, feels like it's just comes through, it's absorbed through our pores.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff is like in muscle memory, it feels like to me. It's just reflex, automatic. And so because of that, I think there's an active process, an intentional process of unlearning and unpacking that. Well, and it is an ongoing process.
Yeah. Because it's unconscious. And so if it's unconscious, it's reflexive and you don't know. And so I feel like the active, in my experience anyway, has been seeking things out to show me, to go, there it is. And you're like, oh, damn. You have to bring it from the unconscious into the conscious.
Absolutely.
To be able to do anything about it. This is so great. Melissa, what's your website so people can read your blog?
Yes, you can find me at melissatoler.com. And my blog is under a tab called Truth Telling.
Love it. And I like to follow you on Instagram, and that is at Melissa Toler.
At Melissa D. Toler.
Melissa D. Toler. Thank you. Yeah. And again, we'll put links to all the things in the show notes, as we always do. This was helpful. Thank you so much. It's
thank you.
It's a tough conversation. Awesome. It's uncomfortable. And you know what? Whenever we have these conversations, someone listening, if we have said anything that offended you, or you felt marginalized or left out or unseen, like, let us know. That's not unsolicited around here. That is solicited. Like, shoot me an email. I always say, don't be a jerk about it. You don't need to be mean. We're also like working on it. But you know what? At the same time, I'm not going to police your tone. If you're pissed off and you want to be mean, go for it. I'm not fragile. I don't need you to be kind about it. It's my preference. But like, I'll state my preference, but I'd rather know than you like work hard to be nice about it. If we're missing something, or if you have something to add to the conversation, we always post when the podcasts come up, we post it on Instagram. You're welcome to find me in DMs. I invite people in for that because I want to know. And like we were just saying, as we wrapped up, a lot of it is unconscious. And so there's, of course, still areas where I don't know what I don't know, where Melissa still doesn't know what she doesn't know. And we want to know.
We want to know, yes.
So hopefully, with all conversations like this, I'm like, hopefully we did more good than harm.
I hope so.
I think we did. I think we did. It felt that way. So thank you, Melissa, again, so much for your time and all of your effort and energy and stuff. And I will continue to follow along with what you're doing and as you evolve in this, and really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
And unity that whole concept of unity really does, at its core, it says that folks have to conform to be together.
Right.
And when I'm in solidarity with you, I don't necessarily have to agree with everything you do. Right? But I know we're going the same way, right? Like we're trying to make that same outcome, right? But it is not the sense that you and I have to be you. Like I have to literally fit in to be accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. So the distinction I'm hearing is unity requires conformity. Solidarity does not.
No, from my perspective, it does not require conformity. And solidarity is a way to show up so this unity tries to give you this undivided entity, which we know isn't true and doesn't happen.
Right.
So, and solidarity, I don't have to be you to understand your humanity.
Yes.
I don't have to have your lived experience to know that you deserve health care. I don't have to be a woman in a wheelchair to know that woman in a wheelchair deserves all of these things simply because she's human.
Yeah.